So for the past week or so, there's been a decent amount happening behind the scenes with respect to FlightCast and other stuff that I've been putting together, including a new schedule of operations for the shows and whatnot. But that doesn't mean that there hasn't been any news. I mean, there really hasn't been like a ton of major news. I mean, there's been a few things here and there, and definitely some feedback. Not everybody that normally chimed in this week, but we did get some feedback for Flight Chat this particular week. So that's what today's episode will be. We'll see how long that goes. Shouldn't be too terribly long, famous last words. But hey, let's just go ahead and dive into it. Starting, of course, with John, who sent two major emails and then another one with some minor extras, he says. But here, let's start with his first email that he sent called The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and the Questions. All right. He says the good. Sunday, last Sunday, I'm guessing, was mostly a good day. Busy, actually. Tammy and I finally got to do some cosplay shoots together. Oh, that's cool. Good deal. Had a nice brunch with Tammy, my mom, my brother, and his fiance. All right. Fair enough. Later had dinner with my father, and after that I saw the latest incarnation of the Beach Boys with my best friend Nick. All right, so that's the good. The bad, unfortunately, and this is a rough one. First, he says Tammy's grandma died. Oh, that's awful. Condolences for sure. She lived with her along with her parents and her older brother. He says memorial service will be held this weekend. She was 94 though, so that's a long life. Yeah, 94 is that's 94 is a good out. It is. My grandfather, who passed a couple years ago, he got to 93, and he was as spry and as energetic as any old person, as any older individual would hope to be for sure. So yeah, no, that's a good life, I would hope, for sure. He says, too, here's why I said mostly. See this pic of me with my mom and Tammy? Notice the shorts. This is the last pic I will ever have with these shorts. Well, let's see. What pic does he have looking at the... Oh, okay. All right. So, yes. Okay, on the surface, I don't see anything wrong, but let's hear the rest of what he had to say. He says, it was a warm Sunday, but later in the day as I met up with my father for dinner, it got cold. So I changed out of my shorts into jeans in the bathroom, and by the time I headed to the show, I realized the shorts were missing. Oh, no. I was angry about it for 2 days, he says. I called the restaurant, no sign of them. Checked my car, my friend's car, my dad checked his car, but they disappeared. It was extraordinarily frustrating because this was the third pair of shorts I lost this year. Third? Yikes. My goodness, not a good year for shorts for you, John. The second loss wasn't as bad as it had a giant hole in it, but these gray cargo shorts and light blue swimsuit shorts hybrid, they were both lost under similar circumstances. I misplaced the first pair leaving a hotel. I lost the third pair leaving a restaurant. But why don't you buy new ones? Random strangers will tell me. Well, the problem is, he says, the light blue ones were a gift. I have no idea where they're from. The second pair, which were black with white stripes track shorts, I bought in Mexico, so I have no idea where to go. And the third ones I bought at Costco, he says, last year. But they might be out of print. I'll get over it, he says. Good thing your sister didn't plan the wedding this week here in the Bay. We got a December-ish cold front this past week, so no need for shorts for a while. You know, I will say this. I mean, it's certainly not going to tell you, oh, why don't you just buy new shorts? Because I hear you in terms of, like, you know, not being able to find exactly the kind that you're looking for. My bigger thing is I don't have the confidence you have to change in a public bathroom like that. Because you said it got cold. You met up for dinner. It got cold, so you changed out of your shorts into jeans. Yeah, no. I'm one of those people, seriously. It's just me. I'm not knocking anybody, and I'm not knocking you, John, for how you do your quick changes and whatnot. I don't do quick changes. I will scout ahead as to what the weather is going to be. You know, and yes, of course, weather can be unpredictable and things can change. But I will basically, you know, go with what I got, right? And if necessary, I will wear layers that I need to remove. Like, at the very least, if I have to remove a layer, okay, but not switch a layer, right? I'm not going to, like, for example, when we were in Frisco over a month ago, it's crazy that it's already been over a month now. But when we were there, we had already, like, I saw that the forecast was going to be in, like, the high to mid 70s, right? It was actually much cooler in San Francisco than it was back here in Michigan. They were still dealing with 80s, and we've still been dealing with a lot more unseasonably warm temperatures even since then. So I made certain that my style of attire was layered, right? Like I bought some long sleeve compression shirts that I would wear underneath t-shirts. And if necessary, I could either A, roll up the sleeves, or two, just go ahead and remove that and just go with the t-shirt depending on how warm it got. Now, it didn't get warm enough that I had to remove anything. It worked out. It worked out really well in that regard. But yeah, that's as much as I would do. I do not have the confidence to change wardrobe in public, in a public bathroom like that whatsoever. But that is unfortunate that you lost that pair of shorts. And it's the second pair of shorts. I do like this, though. You said shorts. I salute you. And of course, he included the gif of one of the best Nick shows, one of the best Nickelodeon shows made. Salute your shorts. Love that show. Absolutely love that show. Cap Anawana, we hold you in our hearts. Yes. Doesn't it suck when you lose a pair of clothing, he says? Yes, it does. I've never lost one quite in that fashion, but yes, losing other pairs of clothes, yes. Like if you, or like sunglasses or like an accessory, yes, that does suck. That is annoying. And depending on how much it meant to you, that can definitely, put you in a foul mood for a good period of time, even a couple of days, right? He says the ugly. Oh, here we go. Do you remember the last time you got really pissed off like hardcore was? Losing three shorts made me so angry I kicked the door and punched a wall. Really angered my mom. That's for sure. And he included the gift from, I'm pretty sure this is episode 1 of season 2, of Harcourt punching her dash like really hard, like Bloody Knuckles punch, before she went and picked that fight with the dude in the bar. Yeah, Harcourt went through a lot of shit. Whole lot of emotional shit this season. So yeah, I hear you. All right, so he says, all right, now on to questions. But before I do, I want to explain the Mike and Sully scene being similar to the end of Peacemaker Season 2. He says, my friend said it was similar to their boss banning them in a snowy mountain, not that the film ended like the show ended. Oh, okay. This is, when I thought about that initially, John, my first thought was, okay, it's been a minute. Like, it seriously has been a minute since I've sat down and watched Monsters, Inc. In fact, how many Pixar movies have I watched multiple times? I don't know. I really have not watched that many Pixar movies multiple times, to be honest with you. I've seen many of them all the way through once, seen many of them at the theater. Monsters, Inc. I did not see at the theater. That was one that I definitely saw later, but I was not recalling that scene. And thank you for sending the GIF. I get it. I'm vaguely picking up and vaguely recalling the scene that you're talking about in that scene, so I got you. All right. Fair enough. Thank you for the clarification. All right. On to the questions. Question time, he says. So, number 1. Sometimes I feel like the more people join social media, the more out of touch with reality they become, he says. How do I mean? Well, Dave the Film Junkie follows a woman. I think her handle was named Comic Fan, and she was all like, good luck, DC, with your 378th reboot, implying the DCU is done, cooked, finito. I'm not sure if she was trolling, but Dave said we only ever had one before the DCU, but that her point still stands. I pointed out that we should wait and see where we are by Man of Tomorrow, to which she replied, not even up to that. I feel kind of bad for Dave sometimes, he says, that he still deals with both sides of the cult and the occasional DC sucks at what they do in general, folks. I guess because his show is formatted different than yours, he can't mute words or mute blocks because of how he does his show. Still, he says, I'm under the impression that this woman was either going by allegedly Superman not being a huge moneymaker, the polarizing ending to Peacemaker, or perhaps the motives for the post is a culmination of both. I have no idea, but people like her don't live in reality and only have a surface level understanding of what success looks like. John says, Peacemaker and Superman were both topping the views on HBO Max. How many franchises can say a film and show can be number 1 at the same time? Not many. But when I interact with people in real life, he says they don't talk about data and numbers like this. I think the more I go out and socialize with people at events, the more I realize how small of an echo all of these trepidations toward entertainment truly is. Like, for example, he says, I follow Beach Boy fan stuff, and a common trend is people hate the lead singer Mike Love for a number of reasons, some that are justified. He talks smack about the Rolling Stones' their Hall of Fame induction back in the 80s. His political positions, how they took a clip of Brian Wilson saying, I don't like Mike Love at all, back in the 2000s, even though they were on better terms between then and his death. But at the show, which was a resort, nobody in the crowd, he says, talked badly about Mr. Love. They were just talking about things like how long they've been fans, what songs they like. It is astounding to me, he says, how often I forget that, ironically, all these people who have inflammatory takes on comic book media, music groups, sports teams, etc., are just a bunch of corks on the ocean. Meanwhile, the people who actually sit in their seats to watch are just trying to enjoy the big crews that are running through the corks. Perhaps my lack of going out in the real world on a regular basis is what keeps me in this perpetual cycle of seeing annoying things online, he says. Thankfully, I've decided I'm going to work more hours driving Lyft so I don't have to deal with this noise as much. What do you think? Well, this is a perfect segue, John, for me to talk about the whole Zack Snyder nonsense that happened a couple of days ago, because that's a perfect microcosm of exactly what you're talking about. Zack Snyder, for people who don't know, a couple of days ago, first of all, within the last few weeks, he's popped up on Instagram. He has an Instagram account. And he's been posting pictures from his current film, his current project that he's working on, and also some past prior films that he's been working on as well. And sure enough, what does he do? A couple days ago, earlier this week, I guess, he posted an image of Henry Cavill's Superman, which I'm pretty sure is from BVS. I'm not 100% certain of it. And he just posted it and it said, Henry Cavill is Superman. That's all he does. He posts that on Instagram. And I mean, Culture Crave and Fandom Wire and Discussing Film, I mean, they glommed onto that like flies to shit, and they threw it out there like, oh, look what Zack Snyder just posted. And they did that for a reason. They did that to stoke the fire. And they did that because they knew it was going to get attention. They did that because they knew that the perpetually online and the people who live on social media are going to make a big deal out of that. And sure enough, they did. And I didn't even know that this had happened until I saw Slav post about it. Now, Slav, who is the host of Slav's Free Talk, I met him a little while ago when I first came back to Vodka Stream. One of the first episodes that came back, Dave was interviewing him. I've since then followed him on TikTok and on Threads. Slav's cool. Like, I don't have any issues with Slav. I've watched a ton of his videos. I am very, like, simpatico with a lot of what he says. But in this case, I think he was absolutely barking up the wrong tree. And when I say barking up the wrong tree, I don't mean that he was looking for trouble. I think that he is overestimating a situation for what it actually is. Because this comes out, right? This picture comes out. And of course, there's all the hubbub and there's all the talk. And he wrote an article on his site. And all I saw was the actual, yeah, I'm pretty sure this picture is from BVS. But the posting that he had for his article, he said, Zack Snyder posting Henry Cavill is Superman isn't just a nostalgic nod. It's a flare shot straight into the Snyderverse echo chamber. He knows exactly what kind of storm that stirs up, and it's not helping the DCU move forward. Now, I didn't read his article because, quite honestly, that post was enough for me to be like, yeah, bullshit, Slav, absolutely not. And I was going to comment on him. I was going to, like, respond to it, but I said, no, let it be where it is. Because quite honestly, no disrespect to Slav, he doesn't have that many followers, and I don't need to push that out into the ether any further than it already is because it's such a non-story. It's such bullshit. It's ridiculous. And so when I read the story, right, when I actually go to Slav's website and give him a click, because like I said, I do still like Slav. He's still cool. But it says on October 17th, 2025, Zack Snyder celebrated 3 weeks on Instagram with a black and white photo of Henry Cavill in the Superman suit. The caption, Henry Cavill is Superman, from BVS shot with my monochrome 50mm Noctilux, 3 weeks on Instagram, thanks to everyone. And he says, sounds sweet, right? A nostalgic nod to a past collaboration. But let's not kid ourselves. This isn't just a harmless post. It's a signal flare. No, it's not, Slav. You're over frickin' reacting. But he says, we've been here before, time and time again. Snyder drops a crumb and the Snyder Bros feast like it's Thanksgiving dinner. He could have quietly celebrated his Instagram milestone with a behind-the-scenes photo. Maybe a still from one of his current projects. Or, here's a thought, not tie it directly to a character currently being rebooted by James Gunn in DC Studios. But no, he chose Superman. He chose Cavill. And he chose to say Henry Cavill is Superman at a time when David Cornswet is literally stepping into the cape for a new era. That's not accidental. That's a bullhorn, and let's call this what it is. Tone deaf at best, ego-driven at worst. God, this is such a gross overreaction from Slav. I'm going to keep going, though, because I want to make my point here with respect to this is how being on social media and being in the fandom really does kind of rot your brain. Even good people like Slav, it rots your brain, right? He says, this post doesn't just stir the pot. It's like handing out torches at a fireworks factory. Snyder knows his most loyal fans will take any mention of Cavill as proof that the Snyderverse lives on in the shadows, waiting to be restored. And inevitably, that false hope turns into toxic online behavior. We've seen this movie too many times before. Mass comment spam, brigading, wallets closed hashtags, and personal attacks on anyone who dares support the current DCU. It's exhausting. And then he tries to, bring it back because he's gone in ham on Snyder here for a little bit. And he says, the tricky part for me is Snyder's work is good in my eyes. His DC trilogy is visually stunning and a lot of fun. 300, Watchmen, Dawn of the Dead, Army of the Dead, all entertaining, stylistically bold, and memorable. The artist deserves credit. But Snyder, the man, he knows exactly how to keep his cult of personality alive. A post like this isn't about Superman. It's about Zack Snyder reminding the world he can still make the fandom bend around him. That's not romantic. That's manipulation dressed up as nostalgia. Wow, this is disgusting. Seriously. The DC fandom is fractured enough as it is. Snyder loyalists versus gun supporters versus people just begging for good DC movies. We can't keep pretending these posts are innocent. They're gasoline on a fire that's been burning for nearly a decade. If this really is the new era of DC, then at some point, someone of importance needs to say the quiet part out loud. The Snyderverse is gone. It's not coming back. Gunn may not be the villain some corners of the internet make him out to be, but Snyder, he's not exactly playing the hero here either. And that's Slav's entire post. All right, now let's tear this to shreds. Because seriously, he's overreacting. He's horrifically overreacting. And this is where being in an echo chamber really does screw with you. Really does rot your brain. Because first of all, there is not a damn thing. This is what I would ask Slav. What exactly is this going to do? What is Zack Snyder's Instagram post actually going to do? What danger does it actually pose? None whatsoever. The only thing it does is it frustrates you because you keep paying attention to dumbasses on the internet. And that's all you got to do to make this go away. Stop paying attention to the assholes on the internet. Stop paying attention to the cult. Stop paying attention to everybody that would feel stoked about this. You know how many Snyder cultists I've blocked every time I see a sell the Snyderverse to Netflix post? Brooklyn Batman brings up these idiots all the time. And it's so easy to block them and push their nonsense into the ether because it's not going anywhere. There's nothing to do, okay? The DCEU is objectively dead, and this does nothing. It absolutely does nothing but piss off people that spend way too much time on the internet. This is a nothing story. Absolutely nothing. But discussing film and Culture Crave and Fandom Wire, they push that out there because they know it gets people like Slav and others pissy. And oh my goodness, this is never going to go away. It won't go away because you won't let it go away. Ignore it. Leave it alone. This is not the real world. The majority of the general audience that just saw Superman doesn't even remember what the Snyder Cut is, if they even know that it exists. I still have people that I have to tell them, if they're interested, that there is a Snyder Cut of Justice League. Most of them only know that there's a Justice League movie that came out in 2017. They have no idea that there's two versions, let alone the story behind it. They don't know about the damn hashtags. They don't know about any of the shit. The internet, social media is an echo chamber. And writing a piece like this is stupid. I'm not trying to come down on Slav. I'm not. Slav's cool. But this is ridiculous. This is utterly ridiculous, and he needs to not feed into this. All of us need to not feed into this and talk about how, this is just more gasoline in the fire. No, it isn't. It's a fire that you won't stop. You know what it is? Here, how about this? Let me relate this to The Simpsons, okay? Everybody remember, for those of us that have watched the first 10 Transformers, remember the one where there was the lightning strike and it turned all of the marketing in Springfield into monsters that was smashing and terrorizing the city. And remember what the resolution was? Lisa and everybody figured out that what they had to do was not pay attention to it. If you don't pay attention to the marketing, if you ignore it, then it all dies off. And remember, it got down to that last, the donut guy, the big donut character, the one that Homer wouldn't stop looking at. And they finally, when they got him to stop looking at it, that's when all the monsters died. That's what you're going to do. If you really want this to die, if you really want all of this fandom created nonsense to die, stop paying attention to it. Stop bringing attention to it. This is why I didn't comment. This is why I didn't extend it. This is why I instead commented on my own thing. Or at least gave my own opinion, rather, is what I should say. Because this is silly. This is utterly silly. This is a nothing burger. This is a fan construct. This has absolutely zero impact on the DCU whatsoever, which is probably why James Gunn and Peter Safran have said nothing about it. It's harmless. It is. It is harmless in the grand scheme of things. This does not affect the DCU. This does not affect the future of the franchise whatsoever. It's all echo chamber nonsense. And that's what happens, John, is when we spend too much on social media, we get too immersed in the fandom and whatnot. We think that this shit actually affects real life. No, it doesn't. No, it absolutely does not. You know how many people still don't know who Zack Snyder is, let alone that he has an Instagram, let alone that he even posted this a couple of days ago on Instagram to denote him being on the platform for 3 weeks. And even if you tell somebody, like if I go tell my mom or my sisters or anybody else, hey, Zack Snyder posted this BVS image for being on Instagram for 3 weeks, they're going to go, oh, okay. And these are all people, mind you, that have seen the movie Superman, right? And they've seen the other movies, and they're not as connected to the franchises as we are, and the things that are important to us are not important to them. They just want to go see movies that they enjoy and have a good time in the theater, right? In many ways, and I've said this before, it would be nice to be a member of the general audience because there's way less stress, there's way less pressure, there's way less bullshit. There's none of this nonsense around where, oh my God, we've got to freak out because Zack Snyder, who gives a shit what he posts? It does not matter. He's out. The DCEU is out. The Snyderverse and the DCEU are dead. We know this. We understand this. Nothing burger. You are only making it worse by calling attention to it and paying attention to it. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense. And this is what happens when you spend too much time on social media and let it rot your flippin' brain like this. It's unbelievably harmless. So, Slad's entire post, I could not disagree with it more. I could not think it's even any more ridiculous because it is harmless. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And yeah, it is the product of us paying too much attention to the echo chamber and the nonsense of fandoms on social media. And if we actually did touch grass, if we actually did go get some fresh air, take a deep breath in the real world once in a while, we would understand and we would see that the majority of planet Earth does not look at these things the same way that we do at all, right? And that goes with respect to the DCU's success as well. The only reason we paid attention to those numbers is ever with respect to any of these movies is because we wanted to determine if the studios would move forward with what it was they were doing that we actually enjoyed. Well, we know the DCU is moving forward. We know that Lanterns is coming up in the spring. We know that Supergirl is coming out in the summer. We know that Clayface is coming out at the beginning of fall. That's all happening. We know Man of Tomorrow has a release date for July of 2027. There's no questions about this. It doesn't matter how much Superman made. It doesn't. Because the next chapters of the DCU are happening. And all that matters is that Warner Brothers is doing what they do, right? And DC Studios is doing what they do. That's what matters. All this other nonsense is just fitting narratives and cockamamie fan-contrived bullshit that means absolute jack and shit at the end of the day. So, yeah. I'm with you. It actually would be a good idea for all of us, not just you, John, but for all of us, to get outside a little bit more and spend way less time on social media and the internet, because it is rotting the shit out of our brains. My goodness. Oi. All right. Next question, number 2. John says, you don't have to answer this, but was there a time you ever snuck a snack in the movies? Usually I'm okay buying the popcorn and soda, but the gummy bears are like $5 or $6 at concessions. I'd rather just get them for $2.50 at the store, and maybe I'll sneak in a mini Coke can, but the snapping sound is a bit risky, though. Not gonna lie. So if I remember correctly, and I hope I'm not Mandela affecting this, there was one time. I'm almost certain that the same time that I had the issue at Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and I had to go to the bathroom twice, was also the same time that we snuck Qdoba into the theater. I'm almost certain that was the case. And if I remember correctly, Shonda had it in her bag and like in her pockets in the because when did that come out? I want to say it. I think that was the movie that it happened. I know that that happened. I know that that definitely happened. So yes, that has absolutely occurred. And I'm going to be honest with you. Listen, I understand that like concession workers and people who work at theaters, right? I get it. That's their job. It's their livelihood. And yes, especially now with like like the Imagine Theater chain that I go to, you can get alcohol, you can get pizza, you can get nachos and whatnot stuff like actually brought to you, on a tray after you sit down in your seat, right? Yes, I totally get that that's how it's supposed to go, but I am not going to crush people that bring in candy or other things. And look, I tell you what, like I hear you in terms of like what'd you say? You said a mini Coke can. Okay, I could see that. Or get one of the mini 8 ounce or do they have the mini 8 ounce bottles? Like what? The smaller ones, right? Obviously not a 20 ounce. A 20 ounce isn't going to fit unless you're like wearing a trench coat or something. But like, how small are the mini Coke bottles? I'm actually curious about this. Yeah, they're 8 ounce or 12 ounces. Pardon me. Yeah, the little 12-ounce bottles. Now that one, if you open it slow enough, right, or if you wait for a loud point in the theater, it also depends on how many people are in the theater that you're in, right? And this would be another reason why it would be great to go to a theater when it's not full, because not that anybody's necessarily going to rat you out, because I think the majority of people don't give a shit and don't care, right? But if you don't want to call attention to yourself with respect to that, yeah, that's a whole. I'm not going to fault you on that. I'm not going to knock you for that whatsoever. That's It is what it is, unfortunately. Hard times in the economy, and in many ways, I feel like, okay, if you got them buying a ticket, especially the way ticket prices have gone up, then you know what? I feel like, not saying that you can't make it obvious. Like I remember one time we were waiting in line for The Dark Knight Rises, and these kids went and got Buffalo Wild Wings and pizza. And yeah, they were not allowed to bring those into the theater. They were eating it in line, and it's like, no, you cannot bring all that into the theater. The ushers obviously confiscated it and tossed it out. And listen, that you have to do, they have to do that. That's their job, right? Like, but it was also stupid for those kids to like flat out buy takeout and just have it brazenly in their hands as they were going into the theater. So yeah, you don't be obvious with it, but if you can make it work, it is what it is. That's as best as I'll put it. It is what it is. So here we go. Third and final question. This one's a bit more personal. He says, I need some advice. Do you think it's important for you and your spouse's families to get along to make the relationship work? Um, I would say that it helps, but it's not vital. I don't think it's vital personally. And the reason I don't think it's vital is because I think that the family unit, whatever family unit you have, should respect your decision and should understand your decision. And if they have issues, with your significant other, then one, they should absolutely have the stones to be able to bring that up to you. And if they don't, well, then they're creating a bigger problem than need be. And at the end of the day, your significant other is not dating your family; they're dating you, right? They're married to you, like whatever it is. They're in the relationship with you. So, especially nowadays, because you hear a lot of people along like political lines and moral lines and ethical lines talking about how they are they're cutting out the toxic people in their life. And I don't even think that that's something that necessarily has popped up as a result of all the political nonsense that's been going on. I think it's really post 2020 stuff. I think 2020 caused a lot of people to reevaluate their lives and the protect their peace a lot more than they used to. And so there's a lot less rather, I should say, that they will allow and put up with today than they did before 2020. And that's part of it, right? If you've got family members that are complete assholes and just always have nothing but mad negativity and shit to throw your way, maybe in the past, at the behest of your parents or whoever else it was, said, hey, just be peacemaker, don't start anything, whatever. Yeah, well, screw all that. Because if the person's going to be toxic, it doesn't matter if they're blood or not, they don't need to be in your life in that regard. They don't need to be harshing your calm. They don't need to be affecting your happiness in that regard. And if they have an issue with that, well, then they can change their behavior because I find that the majority of the family members that, don't realize they're being toxic, that like they are actually being toxic and are not willing to actually see how they're being toxic. Like they don't have the open mindedness or the presence to be able to evaluate their own behavior because they're convinced that they're the elder and whatever they say should go. Well, no, that's not how it works. That's not how the world ever should have worked, and it's certainly not how it's going to work now. So, however old you are, whatever uncle, grandparent, parent, whoever it is, cousin, whatever it is, you're going to have to reevaluate your own behavior and look at yourself in the mirror if you got other family members saying, hey, you're an asshole, I want you out of my life. You're toxic and I want you out of my life. If you're not willing to even look at inward at all with respect to that, then that's absolutely part of the problem. And I don't think that it is vital. I mean, it can be beneficial and it can make things easier, but at the end of the day, it's about you and your loved one. It's about you and your significant other. It's about you and who you are in the relationship with. That is what should be most important on the docket, right? Everything else is secondary. Everyone else is secondary in that regard. So that's what I would say. It helps when it does, but it doesn't have to be. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to be difficult. Sure it is, but that's when you have to decide what is more important. And for some people, family is more important than a relationship, and vice versa. Well, if family is more important than a relationship, then you're not long for a relationship now, are you? And that doesn't mean that you don't disregard, that doesn't mean you completely disregard your family for your relationship, but it does mean that your family's got to respect your choice and understand the situation and realize that, hey, it ain't your life. It is, or it's not their life, rather, it is your life that you are going to live based on your adult decisions in that regard, right? We're all adults in that regard. So, that's something, if they cannot respect that, and if they cannot understand that, and if they cannot accept that, then yeah, you're going to have to do what you got to do. And maybe that means cutting them out or pushing them aside. because at the end of the day, your happiness and your peace of mind is what is most important, regardless of whether or not your family agrees with it. That's the best advice that I can give you, subjectively speaking, from my perspective. All right, cool. So now let's move on to John's second email here. This one is titled Good But Sentimental Vibrations. He says, I had to think about where I'm at in regards to my rock concert rankings after the Napa Beach Boys show. Probably number 3, he says, because seeing Ringo with my dad alongside my best friend and his dad was a nice experience. But there is something that happened during the show that makes my feelings about lead singer Mike Love complicated. Okay, so you were talking before about the perception of Mike Love in the previous email, so how about this? He says, since Brian's death in the June, the band played this tribute video for every show. I videotaped most of the show. Of the one where they pay respects to Brian is my drive. I'd like to share it. All right. So he shared the Facebook post of it. He said, I had seen posts that stated Mike broke down in tears at that show. Well, as a witness, I think you did sound a bit emotional about it, he says. 4 months of playing the same tribute video of your bandmate / first cousin that you knew for 80 years can take its toll on you, not to mention his younger former NBA star brother Kevin Love died a couple of months before Brian, so I can imagine it must be a difficult position to be in. While the video was playing, the only person I saw on stage was Mike sitting and watching the video play. He doesn't have the best reputation of the world of music, he says. He's viewed as egotistical, narcissistic, and a coattail rider bandwagoning on the success of his 3 cousins' talents. But he's also a human being that experienced losing family members that are younger than him. He was the oldest among his siblings and cousins, like me, he says. My cousin Greg is a year younger than me and a gifted musician plus businessman. My brother is 3 years younger than me. I also have maternal cousins, Elias, who's 19, and Sophia, who's 16. Brian's a year younger than him, almost turned 83, he says. Dennis, the drummer, 3 years younger than him, died at 39. While drowning, and the youngest Wilson was their lead guitar player, Carl, who was 5 years younger, died from lung cancer at 51. Stan was 8 years younger than him. I think he also lost another sibling, too. If I was in Mike's position, outliving most of my family, that'd be hard to deal with. So I believe his affection towards Brian was genuine. He even named one of his kids after him. I mean, he's 84, and along with his other Beach Boy, Bruce Johnson, and their band, which also includes one or two of them, or their children, two of their children, play in the band with them. All right, it's pretty deep. Also, question 1, he says, speaking of the Beach Boys, something really spooky happened today. I watched an episode of Baywatch, which members of the Beach Boys guest starred. The episode around in the early 90s. The lineup, Mike Love, Bruce Johnston, Al Jardine, and David Marks, plus a couple of others. Why do I bring this up? He says because these 4 are the only living core members left. There are 2 other official members, but they only lasted like a year. Carl Wilson was still very much a part of the band's lineup until 97. It was common for Brian to not be around, as his duties as a live performing Beach Boy were sporadic. David Marks was a founding member from 1961 to 63, filling in for Al. Little dental humor since Al attended dental school while David was here. He also took over Carl's parts when all 5 remaining core members did a 50th anniversary album and tour in 2012. Still, the timing of seeing that sends me chills. That is quite a coincidence, isn't it? Prior to 2012, Brian and Al stopped touring altogether with Bruce and Mike, and after Carl died, Marks was also Carl's childhood friend and filled in for Carl for a couple of years. Did that ever happen to you, where you saw a group, music or otherwise, were together for an event that 1 or 2 people were absent for said events that predated their deaths? That is an extremely specific question, John. No, that has never happened. The situation that you brought up, as you have detailed it descriptively, is extremely unique. No, that has never happened. I've never, no. That has never occurred in that regard. Not that I can think of at all. But of course, I don't go to shows, right? I don't go to concerts and whatnot. So that's not really going to happen for me, to be honest with you. But no, I've never had a situation quite that specific and quite that unique in that regard. So you're kind of on an island on that one. Although I'm sure others probably, whether they're Beach Boy fans or otherwise, probably share a similar sentiment or a similar situation like that. Number 2, he says, examples I can think of is this. So he's got 2 examples rather. He's got other examples of this. Jim Morrison quit the Doors months before his death, so 3 other 3 band members stayed on as a trip and released their album Other Voices, as Jim would die shortly after and he wasn't involved on It's Pretty post-mortem. And then also in 1979, Paul George and Ringo attended Eric Clapton's wedding. John was invited, but the invitation either got lost or didn't get sent in time. There's some conspiracies about that, and as you know, John was killed a year later. This is getting morbid. This is turning into a morbid discussion, but I hear you. Okay, fair enough. All right, let's move on to the second question in this second email. He says, which Star Trek cast guest appearance did you like more? Original series cast on Futurama or next gen cast on Family Guy? I admit Stewie taking them to McDonald's was pretty funny, and yet the Planet Express crew decapitating the crew after they just got new bodies is so dark it's funny, something South Park or Family Guy would do. All right, this is a good question. Between the two of them, my answer is Futurama, and here's why. First of all, they're both funny. They're both good. The Family Guy one was cool. Even the Tasha Yar joke was darkly funny, right? That's the whole thing with how he beamed them over at first, and Denise Crosby says, "But you're a baby," and he shoots her like that. That's a reference to Tasha Yar's death in season 1 of the show, and it was actually Denise Crosby that said that line, right? So yes, seeing them all together on Family Guy was funny. It was cool. It was like a fish out of water thing and whatnot. The reason I like the Futurama one better is because that wasn't just a cameo appearance. That whole episode was about Star Trek, because the idea was that they were on a planet that was populated by a Star Trek superfan, and Fry challenged him to like a battle of knowledge over who was the biggest Star Trek fan, because he wanted them to reenact like his favorite Star Trek episodes, right? And this had to do with the fact that the show like got banned and was like removed from all of Earth, and in bodiless form, only heads, they all left the planet and like went elsewhere, and also to get everybody together, and a number of them have passed since then, but at the time when that episode was shot, the only ones that had passed were DeForest Kelley, who played McCoy, and James Doohan, who played Scotty. But at that point, Shatner, Nimoy, Nichelle Nichols, and George Takei and Walter Koenig were all still there. And so getting them all together again was awesome. And just the whole episode was Star Trek themed, right? Which wasn't the case with the Family Guy episode. The Family Guy episode, the Star Trek thing, if I remember correctly, was the B plot. But the Futurama episode was a complete Star Trek like homage and a Star Trek tribute. And I love the fact that like it further cemented how much fans the writers of Futurama were of Star Trek, because there are so many Star Trek references throughout the show, right? And again, if you are a diehard Trekkie, you will get every last one of them, right? And maybe even learn about some of the more obscure ones. But yeah, that Futurama, I think, was a better circumstance and a better setting for them to come back in, and the episode was completely centered around them and around Star Trek. So yeah, I would say the Futurama one was definitely a better appearance between the two, in my opinion. And then question 3, who would win in an argument, Sheldon Cooper or Rick Sanchez? Without even having seen a single episode of Rick and Morty, I'll go ahead and say Rick Sanchez for 2 reasons. One, he has the ability, as far as I know from what he does, he has the ability to prove Sheldon wrong by literally changing things or showing him proof that Sheldon doesn't have access to, being a theoretical physicist. And 2, he wouldn't put up with Sheldon's bullshit. And on top of that, Sheldon has lost many an argument in 12 seasons of Big Bang Theory, because there were plenty of cases where he thought he was wrong and he wasn't. I just saw a clip again the other day reminding me of the I think it was the 3rd season episode, where 2nd or 3rd season, where he and Wolowitz were arguing about a cricket that they had caught in the apartment, and he was convinced that it was a snowy tree cricket, and Wolowitz said it's a field cricket. And they literally go to Crawley, Professor Crawley, played by Lewis Black, who is an expert on insects, who confirms that it is in fact a field cricket. And so he lost that argument in that regard. So it's not like Sheldon hasn't lost arguments in the Big Bang Theory before. He's lost plenty of arguments in the Big Bang Theory, because he doesn't know everything, and he is not all-knowing, even though he felt like he was through the majority of the 12 seasons of that show. So yeah, Rick Sanchez would definitely win an argument. Like I said, he has other items at his disposal, and he would not put up with Sheldon's bullshit. So yeah, I would definitely say that. Let's see. All the other emails that you sent, you said you also, part 2 of your podcast, also you finally saw Sinners. You said it seemed appropriate to watch it during the Halloween season. Great movie. It was really suspenseful. Oh yeah, fantastic film. In many ways, yes, I hear you. Halloween is a good time to watch that movie, but it's also not restricted to that, because I mean the movie came out in April, but it really does transcend like the standard horror genre, I would say, in that regard. But yeah, no, fantastic film. To me personally, still the film of the year, right? I have still yet to see a film that good in the year 2025. I think it's tops, and I've seen some damn good films this year. Like I think Black Bag would probably be like my second favorite. I know Scott said that it's his favorite film of the year. Yeah, if it weren't for Sinners, it would be my favorite film of the year. But no, Sinners absolutely takes that top spot. So I'm glad you saw it, John, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. And this is a good time to watch it during spooky season for sure. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for John's emails this week. So as always, John, thank you for the feedback. And definitely get some fresh air out there and stay off of social media. Take some social media breaks as much as possible because it is doing a number on all of us, socially speaking and psychologically speaking. And it's time for us to break away from that bullshit, to be honest with you. Just my own personal subjective opinion. All right, next up is Stu Little. His email this week is titled Do the Mess Around. Oh, I know what that's about. I know exactly what that's about. He's going to talk about a particular documentary that I still have not worked up the courage to watch on Amazon Prime. But here, let's dive into it. He says, Hello, just wanted to briefly say that I enjoyed the Peacemaker finale, with my only real misgiving being how Flag seemingly became fast friends with the Luthor Corps gang as they were working on finding a suitable spot for salvation. I don't see a lot of compatibility between him and them on a personal level. Well, except for with Otis. He seems the most easy to get along with. It wouldn't surprise me, however, if once it's actually all set up and running, he turns on them and throws them in there too, since he doesn't need them anymore and their knowledge of how to make interdimensional portals classifies them as threats too. Yeah, that was really, especially the cocaine scene where he's like doing lines of coke with them, like that. I understand like the sharpness and the severity of that like on screen to show his heel turn, but yeah, that was strong. That was a lot. So yeah, I'm kind of I think everybody else is kind of in the same boat, Stu. We're all just kind of waiting to see just how spectacularly this is going to collapse on him and how badly this is going to go for him because palling around with Lex Luthor and his cronies, horrible idea. Absolutely horrible idea. And it sounds like Rick Flag Sr. is definitely going to learn that the hard way. Just in a long list of people learning that very difficult lesson the hard way. He says, secondly, I have a big recommendation for John Candy, I Like Me. Yep, I knew it. The new documentary on the actor's life, directed by Colin Hanks and out now on Amazon. It's a great tribute to his career and life, Stu says, and shines a light on things I never knew about him, like how he struggled with anxiety due to losing his father when he was 5, or the fact that he did actually work on losing weight at one point and managed to lose 75 pounds before being told that Hollywood liked him big. None of which is to put aside how overall glowing the doc is about how a tremendously caring and warm-hearted guy he was, with the contributions in it from his family and friends and co-workers like Dan Aykroyd, Steve Martin, Catherine O'Hara, Eugene Levy, Bill Murray, Tom Hanks, Macaulay Culkin, and others, stressing how much of a special guy he was on a personal level, in addition to his comedic and even dramatic talent, with stuff like the I Like Me speech from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, the doc getting its name from being cited as a strong example. Come to think about it, it's coming up to the time of year it's appropriate to rewatch that soon, isn't it? Yes, it is. Because Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a Thanksgiving movie, and there's only 2 of those theatrically released. There's Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and there's Dutch. And they're both John Hughes. John Hughes wrote and directed Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He wrote Dutch. He didn't direct Dutch. They're both excellent, and November is the perfect time to rewatch both of those. So yeah, it's about that time. And I tell you, that is arguably the most emotional John Candy performance that I have seen, and I've seen plenty of his performances, and he was absolutely a comedic gem, especially with all those other actors that you listed. But yeah, that's also part of the reason why I haven't necessarily watched I Like Me, because it's what 2 hours or nearly 2 hours, and I know it's going to be emotional, and I know just seeing the others. Like I even watched the clip. This isn't from Steve Martin's documentary when he talked about the scene, the rather infamous scene, if you will, at the end of Planes Trains, when you find out the truth about Dell, that there was this whole line of dialogue that I think they did film, if I'm not mistaken, that was cut out. And it's this whole monologue where Dell basically explains everything in detail and pours his heart out to Neil, and they cut it for time, if you will. But Steve Martin was like getting emotional and like teary eyed talking about that. And that one, like the way that movie ends is just It's like it's heart wrenching, but at the same time, like the ending had to go the way they did. Like I could totally see a test audience going, okay, there's only one way you can end this movie. You cannot end this movie with him just going to his family and leaving Dell at that train station. No, he has to bring Dell with him. Dell must come with him. Dell must join Neil's family for Thanksgiving. That is the only ending that is acceptable to this film. There is no way, after everything they've been through and after finding out the truth about what is going on with Dell, there is no way you can leave his ass alone in that train station, right? It's just one of those really powerful emotional endings. And again, like I said, emotional enough that Steve Martin got like choked up about it again, talking about the part that was cut out. And I've read it, like I've read that line. I forget where I found it, like that piece from the script. Somebody posted it years ago when I first found out that it existed. And I understand why they cut it out. I do. From a production standpoint and from a pacing standpoint, I get why they cut it out. And I've seen a lot of people say that they should have never cut that out. They should have kept that in the movie. Yeah, no, I get it. You really want to get people crying at the end of that movie, put it back. Absolutely put it back. But yeah, it was powerful enough on its own, but just to know that there was that much else behind it, and that Candy, was able to bring Martin to tears even posthumously thinking about it again. Yeah, I mean that just shows you the impact, right? And I love the Second City thing. How you had the SNL guys, and I love that story about how the Not Ready for Primetime players were part of the same Second City troupe that the guys from SCTV were on, and that's how they know each other. That's why they were in so many movies together, right? It's why John Candy is in Home Alone. It's why he did The Great Outdoors, how about this for people? And they probably talked about this in the documentary as well. But I love the fact that Louis Tully, the character that Rick Moranis played in Ghostbusters, was originally written for John Candy. It was originally supposed to be John Candy in that role. And I forget what the scheduling conflict was that it didn't work out, but they brought in Rick Moranis, of course, from the SCTV group to play that role. But yeah, John Candy was absolutely going to be in Ghostbusters. Like, that was the original plan. And he never made it. He never made it, at least not that I recall. Although, I don't think he ever, no, he wasn't in either of the first two films before his passing in that regard. But yeah, I want to see that documentary. I do, and one of these days, maybe closer to Thanksgiving, I'll give it a watch. I just know it's going to be an emotional one because John Candy was definitely a comedic actor that I grew up with and saw a lot of his great performances in across the board again with Aykroyd and Steve Martin and Bill Murray and all the others. So yeah, no, it's going to be an emotional one for sure, but I hear you. Thank you for the rousing vote of confidence in it for sure. I've heard nothing but great about it, to be honest with you. He says, my last main thing after the previous email about classics is about my first watch of what could be considered a hidden gem. Even though I understand it was well received at the time, but I'm not too aware of it being talked up too much. That's the 1985 Western Silverado, co-written and directed by Lawrence Kasdan of Raiders of the Lost Ark and Empire Strikes Back screenplay fame. Yes, indeed. Stu says it's a very good movie from a decade where the genre wasn't in its heyday anymore, but managed to be a fairly serious, straight-up Western action-adventure with some fun aspects to it, no doubt due to its rather eclectic-seeming cast. Our main guys are Scott Glenn, Kevin Costner, Danny Glover, and Kevin Kline. Wow. Okay. Glenn made a lot of sense, he says, playing the tough but decent gunslinger in it. Danny Glover's cool and defiant of the predictable prejudice he has to tackle head-on, and his family-related subplot makes him pretty sympathetic. Kevin Costner in a Western isn't surprising, but as Scott Glenn's younger and goofier brother, he was playing against what I've come to think of as type for him. And finally, an arguably kind of equal main protagonist with Glenn was Kevin Kline, who with his comedy roles really surprised me here. Yeah, his character's actually a fairly laid-back guy who doesn't really want to get into anything heavy, but as a former outlaw, he has a lethal side that can switch on in an instant, and a good bit of the plot's dramatic tension is his complex relationship with Brian Dennehy as the main villain, which worked really well despite me thinking of him as a more contemporary tough guy. Stu goes on to say there's also John frickin' Cleese, English accent and all, as a sheriff who's a minor antagonist in the first half of the movie, and Jeff Goldblum as a card shark with a proficiency with knives. Wow, this is a loaded cast. Goldblum, I should have expected in a more serious role at this time, as he was one of the home intruders in the original Death Wish, though he does also dress the way you'd expect modern Jeff Goldblum to if he was in a Western. There's also Jeff Fahey in a minor goon role and Rosanna Arquette as an undeserved love interest, supposedly because a chunk of her stuff got cut out to get the movie down from its original 3 hour plus runtime. 3 hours plus. Wow. All right. This gives the story a bit of a disjointed feel, he says, in a few places, with some awkward plot transitions, but overall it holds up. The action staged really well, the main heroes are likable and interesting, and the villains are pretty hateable with some of the things they do, reminding me of how far a PG-13 rating could go back then. Not that it's particularly graphic, just the more sudden barbarism of what the bad guys are willing to do. The moments of levity are well placed too, he says, like Klein and Costner's funny jailbreak scene, or when Cleese's sheriff is sitting at a chessboard with his deputy, makes his move with the white pieces, then rotates to the board to consider how he's going to move the black. Anyway, he says, have you seen Silverado, and can you think of any movie you thought had an offbeat lineup in the cast that turned out to work really well in the film? So first off, no, I have not seen Silverado. I have vaguely heard of it, but I clearly did not know that the cast was that loaded. Either that or I knew and forgot in that regard. As far as a movie that had an offbeat lineup that turned out to work really well, well, let's see. I'd have to give that one a think. Here, let me look at the shelf over here and see if I can rack my brain on that one. Well, honestly, when it comes to casting, Stu, like the first movies I think of, and maybe you can consider this offbeat casting, but really it's just loaded. Nobody knew at the time. Nobody knew any better at the time, right? There's two Tony Scott movies, and I've brought this up before. I know I have, but there are two Tony Scott movies that came out in the '90s. One in the early '90s, and the other in the late '90s. And both of these casts are insane and ridiculous. And when I read the listing of these actors off, like if you don't know this already, and maybe you have, Stuart, I'm almost certain that you've seen True Romance and Enemy of the State before. If you haven't, then just listen to this, right? Because seriously, with True Romance, which was the first one that I saw, and that came out in '93, Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Gary Oldman as a drug-dealing pimp, Dennis Hopper, Brad Pitt as a stoner that like takes hits out of a honey bear bong, Christopher Walken, Val Kilmer as Elvis Presley, yeah, that's right, as Elvis Presley, James Gandolfini, Samuel L. Jackson, he's in there for like a cup of coffee, but still, he's in there, Michael Rappaport, Chris Penn, Bronson Pinchot, for people who don't know, that's Balky from Perfect Strangers, Saul Rubinek, Google it, you know who he is, trust me, you've seen him before, Jack Black is in the movie briefly. Tom Sizemore, Kevin Corrigan, Victor Arba. This cast is unbelievably, incredibly loaded. It is so loaded that Michael Beach, who played Black Manta's father in Aquaman back in 2018, he's in it as a cop for like a little bit. But there's a bunch of who's in this particular film. It's insane how loaded the cast of this movie is, and it's like, for 2 hours, you're like, okay, this movie's got to be like 3 hours long. No, it's 2 hours and 1 minute, and they're all like spaced out, and you see everybody come. I mean, the movie is primarily Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette. They are the ones that drive the main plot, but you see everybody else pop up at different points, and it's insane. And the only other movie that has a cast just as loaded, and this one is closer to people that, you know, generationally, like millennials and whatnot know, is Enemy of the State. And for people who haven't seen that movie, okay, here we go. Will Smith, Gene Hackman, may he rest in peace, Jon Voight, Regina King, yep, that's right, Jack Black, again, Lisa Bonet, that's Denise from The Cosby Show, for people who don't know, and Zoe Kravitz's mother, Seth Green, Scott Conn, Gabriel Byrne, Jake Busey, Stuart Wilson. These are all names that if you Google them, I guarantee you know who they are. Jason Lee, Barry Pepper, Jamie Kennedy. Yep, that's right, Jamie Kennedy. Anna Gunn. Oh, yeah. Skyler from Breaking Bad is in this movie. That's right. Even Dan Butler, who played Bob Bulldog Briscoe in Frasier, is in this movie. It's loaded. It's beyond loaded. And just everybody that I listed off there, you're like, well, how in the hell did that movie work? It does. It works really well. Tom Sizemore isn't on this list. Tom Sizemore is also massively in this movie. Yes, he is. But this is another who's who. And again, it's a Tony Scott directed action film, and they both have very similar endings where like everybody in a room dies in a massive gunfight. Okay, like it's crazy how these movies have, and they're not, the plots are very different between True Romance and Enemy of the State. They're both very good. They're two of the best Tony Scott movies that have been made. Tony Scott, may he rest in peace, the best pure action director I've ever seen in my life, truthfully. The only reason Michael Bay has a career is because of Tony Scott. And I like Michael Bay for what he does, but Tony Scott is the reason. Tony Scott and his pairings with Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer are literally created the avenue for Michael Bay to exist as a director with respect to what he does and his style, because Scott started it first and started doing that stuff beforehand, and his catalog of movies, my goodness. But those two definitely are, those are the two most loaded, most crazy, like offbeat casts where I'm just like, how on earth? And it wasn't even a case where like I saw the cast and then was like, how is that going to work? No, it was watching the movie and then saying, well, he's in there, she's in there, they're in there. Like, what in the hell? And again, at the time, like even like Enemy of the State is an even bigger one, because when you watch Enemy of the State and then everybody else, like over the years, like again, like I said, Anna Gunn, nobody knew who Anna Gunn was in 1998, but everybody knows who Anna Gunn is now because of Breaking Bad, right? And however you felt about her character, she is iconic now as far as that show is concerned. And you could say the same about so many other actors in that movie. It's insane. It's ridiculous, but yeah, those would be my thoughts, or those would be my my particular picks, because in both cases, the offbeat, crazy loaded cast worked extremely well for both movies, and that's a credit to Tony Scott. That's a credit to the screenwriters. Quentin Tarantino, by the way, wrote the screenplay for True Romance, and had a different ending that they shot that was a lot, well, not a lot, but like darker than the ending that they went with. And I'm glad they went with the ending that they went with, because again, that was another ending where it's like, nah, you got to have it be this as opposed to that in that regard. But whichever, those are my two picks with respect to that. And I love both of those as far as my examples of majorly loaded offbeat casts for sure. Stu says, before I go, quick shout out to Ghosts of Yotai, which I just recently finished and is a very worthy sequel to Ghosts of Tsushima, retaining the samurai ninja coolness of that game while doing a story with a different feel due to its revenge focus, and still very, very, very pretty to look at. And he sent a link for it. All right, good deal. Another video game shout out there, Ghosts of Yotai. Many people have been playing that, Stu. I've noticed that's been getting a lot of attention on social media. But he says, take care, and P.S., tangential Detroit sports thing. Not really interested in the games, though I did once own a Lions t-shirt for the cool logo, and I have to ask, how does the city have a Lions team, a Tigers team, but not a Bears team? Oh my. Yeah, well, the Bears, of course, are the Chicago Bears, right? So Chicago, I guess you could say, took that because they have been, the Bears have been around for a long time, so have the Lions. So that's probably what it was. It's the trademark was taken, because the Tigers are very old, the Lions are very old, the Red Wings are very old. They've been around since 1926. The Pistons are recent, and when I say recent, I mean within the last several decades, recent in that regard. They weren't even originally Detroit; they were originally in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and they moved to Detroit. So, yeah, that's where the naming conventions there come from. But yeah, we'll just say Chicago stole it. Chicago stole the Bears. That's why. And there was not really a consideration for Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz at that time here in the city of Detroit. But either way, thank you as always for the feedback, Stu. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for all the recommendations. And yeah, I'll have to mark Silverado and John Candy, I Like Me, on my list as far as things to watch. All right, we're actually going to close this Flight Chat episode out with Alex De Silva and his email titled Flight Chat number 23, Too Smart for Their Own Good. He says, hey, Ray, at the time of writing, the Patriots are currently leading the AFC East. Going into the season, who would have thought that was possible? Yeah, certainly not me. And they won again today, right? They beat the crap out of, who did they beat today? Trying to remember. The Titans. Yeah, they beat the Titans 31-13. And, I mean, they're 5-2. 5-2 atop the AFC. But I tell you what, the league is so wide open this year. The NFL is so incredibly wide open this year. If I go to the scoreboard, and I was watching Red Zone earlier today before I started recording this show. But, I mean, you got the Cowboys doubling up Washington right now, 44-22. That's crazy because Dallas has really not looked the part all this season, right? The Browns drubbed the Dolphins earlier today. That's crazy, right? How about this? One of the more ridiculous ones, one of the crazier ones. The Eagles and the Vikings were going back and forth, but how about the Colts? The Colts are 6-1 now. They just beat the Chargers 38-24 today. That's crazy. Who would have predicted that? The Jets are winless. I mean, yeah, okay, we could have seen that coming for sure. And I know everybody's like, the Chiefs are back. Yes, because they shut out the Raiders. Yeah, whatever, big whoop. But then, how about the London game? Because now every week we've got a game in London or a game overseas or whatnot. There's like one every week now. The Rams threw the Jaguars down a flight of stairs this morning, like 35-7. I have no idea who watched that game. I did not watch that game. But yeah, and then, oh wow, the Giants were beating the Broncos. How on earth did the Broncos come all the way back? Wow, I have missed a massive comeback. I'm going to have to watch those highlights later. That is insane. But the Giants have the ball. It looked like they were cruising. The Broncos just came out of nowhere, stormed back in the fourth quarter. That is insane. So some crazy stuff, but no, it has been a wide open season so far. I mean, the majority of the league is like 4-2, and maybe some of them are moving to 5-2, and others are moving to 4-3. It's crazy how things have gone. I know we got a big Monday night game tomorrow night against Tampa Bay, and we've got a mash unit on defense again, especially in the secondary. But we're supposed to be getting Lee McNeil, our big D tackle, back. So yeah, it's been a wide open NFL season so far, but yeah, no one would have predicted. At least I wouldn't have predicted the Patriots leading the AFC East at this point. And not only that, I heard the stat, Alex, that for the first time, like not even in the Brady Belichick era, had the Patriots won 3 road games in 3 successive weeks. That apparently is something that Mike Vrabel's New England Patriots just did, that they've never done before, at least not in the Brady Belichick era, and that is insane to me to think that this was a gauntlet, right? Like as far as where were they at? They were at the Saints last Sunday, and then before that the Bills, right? So that's 3 road games in 3 successive weeks, right? They beat the Bills on Sunday Night Football 23-20. They beat the Saints last week in New Orleans 25-19, and then today on the road again at Tennessee, beating the Titans 31-13. How about that? How about that? Y'all got a quarterback. Drake May is absolutely the real deal. Y'all have a quarterback. And you know what? Vrabel, we already knew Mike Vrabel was a good head coach. You're in a good spot. You are. You're in a really good spot. You're halfway to the 10 wins that you would need to get to the playoffs. And yeah, we'll see how the second half of the season goes. But yeah, that is quite a success story, a shock of a success story to start the season for sure. So hey, more power to you on that one, Alex. He says, anyway, let's start with some Scarathon updates. All the movies I'm about to mention are first-time viewings. First, I watched The Exorcist. Oh, boy. Yep. Seen that one. He says the actress who plays the possessed girl in this was only 14 years old, which is crazy because she turned in a really good performance. The stuff required of her couldn't have been easy for a young teen to do. It's no wonder that she earned herself an Oscar nomination for this movie. Yeah, that would be Reagan McNeil. And you know what? I'll tell you what, or at least that was her fictional name. Linda Blair is her real name in real life. But I'll tell you what, my buddy Brian, that I've mentioned many times before, the one who was big on George Romero, Dawn of the Dead, and he showed me the original before we saw the Zack Snyder, James Gunn film at the Palladium Theater later that week. He and also the one that showed me the Evil Dead movies and whatnot. Like, he is a big fan of those types of films, and he showed me The Exorcist for the first time, and I made him stop the movie twice. First, I made him stop the movie after the spider walk down the stairs, and then after the how do I put this? Let's see, the cross stabbing scene. Let blank you. Yeah, that. I cannot say what that actual line is. I will no. It's yeah. To have a child do that, to have a 14-year-old do that was something else. Yeah, that was something else. That was. I don't think you can. I don't know. I haven't seen like horror movies lately, but I think there'd be a lot of problems if you had a 14-year-old do that today. I don't know. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's a. The Exorcist is a chilling movie for many reasons. My goodness, not a jump scares movie, just an unsettling, very disturbing film for a number of reasons. Even more disturbing if you have any connection to like Catholicism or Christian religion. And that fact, yes, without question. So, all right. Then he says, next I watched Psycho, which I believe was my first time watching an Alfred Hitchcock movie. It's clear to see why he was considered a master of suspense. I obviously knew about the famous shower scene going into the movie, but no spoilers. What I wasn't expecting is when it happens in the movie, because after that scene, the entire movie changes. So I have not seen Psycho, even though I'm pretty sure I own it. Do I? Is that one of my blind buys? Here's the thing. So over the course of, yes, I do have it. Over the course of like my movie history, I've come to realize that as a fan of feature films, I have always had a bias towards older movies, right? Which is weird because I don't have a bias towards older sitcoms. I watch a lot of black and white and older sitcoms all the time. But when it comes to older films, right, especially films from like 40s, 50s, 60s, unless it was like a Disney movie that I grew up with, I just have never had an inclination when I was earlier to go back and watch those. As a result, I don't know that I've ever really fully seen an Alfred Hitchcock film. Now, that doesn't mean I've never seen any of his work, because one of the shows that I did watch on Nick at Night when I was a kid was Alfred Hitchcock Presents, right? Obviously, that's not his work, but still, like, the idea of being the master of suspense and like the crazy stuff, yes, there are touches of that for sure. But yeah, there's if I go and he's got a long list of credits here, long list of movies, and just the the mark that he made on cinema is absolutely indelible. And there are many of these movies that I do want to see, like The Man Who Knew Too Much, The 39 Steps. But look at this, 1934 and 1935, right? The Lady Vanishes is 1938. Rebecca, 1940. Let's see. Notorious 1946. I've seen none of these. I'm going through this. Strangers on a Train is one that I really want to watch because that was the inspiration for Throw Mama from the Train, and actually is referenced in the movie. Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, To Catch a Thief. That's another one. I got that recently because it was like 15. The steelbook was like $15. It's like massively discounted, so I do have that. But Vertigo, North by Northwest, The Birds, Marnie, Psycho, as you have now mentioned. Yeah, I mean, I've seen none of them. I've seen absolutely no Hitchcock movies, and one of these days I need to go on like a Hitchcock binge, and that's part of why I've actually like blind bought a couple of his films, because it's like I'm fairly certain that I'm going to like his work. I'm going to like his films, right? But it's just about, finally dipping my toe into that and, finally seeing exactly what they're all cracked up to be. But yeah, Psycho, because there's that version, and then there's also the remake that came out many years later with Anne Heche and Vince Vaughn. But yeah, I will watch the original. And of course, I've never seen Bates Motel, which I know is connected to that. And there are certain things that I guess have kind of been spoiled with respect to Psycho. But as far as what you're talking about with that shower scene, yeah, I'm familiar with the scene, but no, I don't know when it happens in the movie because I haven't seen the movie. But yeah, that's a good one to put on the list for sure to finally watch at some point. He says, after that, I watched The Thing from Another World, which is a classic sci fi horror from the 1950s. It's about an alien who crash lands near an Arctic base and wreaks havoc in a military installation while the people on the base try to outsmart the alien and stay alive. Sound familiar? As I was watching, I thought, wow, this movie must have been a direct inspiration for John Carpenter's The Thing movie. As it turns out, both Carpenter's Thing and The Thing from Another World are based on the same novella, so in a way, you could say that Carpenter's Thing is a remake of Thing from Another World. No, Alex, that's what it's considered. Thing from Another World is 100% considered a remake, or rather, The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing is 100% considered a remake of The Thing from Another World. I knew that. No, that's official. Like people, that's how it's considered in Hollywood. That the John Carpenter's Thing is a remake, but like the thing, obviously, the creature effects and whatnot, and the fact that it came out in '82, I think it might have come out the year I was born, right, or at least early '80s. Obviously, it's more prescient and more prevalent in the minds of the current audience. I don't think too many people have gone back to watch that original 1950s film, and obviously the visual effects and special effects are going to be very different, right? But no, it is as far as I know, it is well understood and accepted that John Carpenter's The Thing is a remake of The Thing from Another World for sure. You watch the original, and yeah, definitely, and that, more than likely, people are going to go the exact same that exact same route that you just went, where you saw The Thing originally, and then you went back and watched the original version, if you will, the first theatrical version from the 50s, if you will, which, yeah, same premise, but obviously is going to look different and is in black and white in that regard for sure. He says, after that, I watched 1944's Gaslight. This movie is most notable for originating the term gaslighting, as in gaslighting another person. What the husband does to the wife over the course of this movie is downright diabolical. This movie is also notable for featuring the screen debut of Mrs. Potts herself, Angela Lansbury. I had no idea what she looked like, but once I heard her voice, I knew exactly who it was. Funnily enough, in Gaslight, she plays a servant not too dissimilar to her character's role in Beauty and the Beast, only in this, believe it or not, she's not a teapot. So that right there, that's also a generational divide, Alex, because I've always known from the beginning what Angela Lansbury looked like. Because before Beauty and the Beast, I saw Murder She Wrote. I was a kid when Murder She Wrote was on television, and that's the first thing. Really, when I hear the name Angela Lansbury, that's still the first thing that I think of. I don't think of Beauty and the Beast first. I don't think of Mrs. Potts first. I think of Murder She Wrote. I think of her character and that show very much so first and foremost. And she'd been in many other things as well. But yeah, that's another generational thing where if you didn't know about that show or if you weren't around when that show aired, then yeah, Mrs. Potts and Beauty and the Beast probably would be the first thing that you would know Angela Lansbury from. And you might not know what she looked like until now. You should go back and see what she looked like even before then, like way back. Like actually like you in this film, right? Like in you said 1944. So yeah, there you have it. Yeah, Angela Lansbury, quite the talent, no doubt about it. He says, finally, I watched the 1923 version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. This is technically classified as the second Universal monster movie ever released. It was surprisingly really good, he says. The movie featured some really impressive sets, including a massive replica of the facade of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. This movie clearly had a big budget considering its decade of release. Yeah, they've remade it a few times, and I know there's a Disney animated version. I know that. I've seen it. So, interesting. The second Universal monster movie ever released. Yeah, again, as I've gotten older, I've realized that I've got to get over my bias on black and white films and like pacing and whatnot, especially since there are a couple of those that I do like. Like I talked last year about Miracle on 34th Street and how I love the original version of that. That's from 1943 or I think even earlier than that. So yeah, what the hell? Or like even like Mary Poppins and other stuff. So it can't be all like my bias has to go away with respect to that. And I need to watch some more of the older classic films. The history of cinema, the history of Hollywood is vitally important with respect to that. So Alex says, now let's move on to more modern topics. He says James Gunn had previously said that the season 2 finale of Peacemaker was the most fun he's ever had on a movie or TV show set. Based on the episode itself and further comments he's made on the podcast, the reason the episode was so fun for him was the music stuff. When people heard him make that original comment, they assumed the episode was going to be fun due to crazy comic booky things, not for the music video aspects. Let's see whether or not Gunn is more careful about how he hypes up future projects in the future. Well, how about this? Can we, as fans, Alex, be more careful about how we hype things up? Because I completely agree with Dave the Film Junkie on this. We do this to ourselves. And I fully admit, and I said this in Flightbox, I fully admit that I did it, right? I fell into the trap, right? I did the same thing. My imagination ran wild, and I thought, hey, we could see this, we could see that. Yeah, I had the same projections, and that's where the disappointment from it came for me in that regard. And going further, you said, I don't hate on the finale like a lot of the internet does, but it's clearly a big disappointment. He says there was a point in the episode where I was so bored that I caught myself audibly sighing and actually thinking this episode sucks. I didn't remain quite that negative as things progressed, but I do remember feeling that it was just such a weird ending. Do you think that Gunn's music shtick is getting old? Between the Guardians trilogy, the Suicide Squad, and now 2 seasons of Peacemaker, we kind of know what to expect in regards to persistent needle drops and setting action sequences to soundtrack music. No, I don't think it's getting old because, one, we're still talking about it, and two, it completely depends on your type of music, right? Am I really a big fan of Nelson or Foxy Shazam? No. So this didn't hit for me. But I still have flippin' punk rocker in my head from the end of Superman. I still feel like that was that might be my favorite needle drop of his, period, right? Like with respect to any of his projects at this point. But no, I don't think it's getting old because I think somebody somewhere is still going to enjoy it. It doesn't have to be you. You don't have to enjoy all of them. In fact, you probably shouldn't enjoy all of them unless you just love every type of music that he likes, and maybe that's the case, perhaps, but no, I don't think it's getting too old. I think it's definitely his style. But pursuant to what you say here, because you said despite the weak finale to Peacemaker, I'm still looking forward to the DCU next year. Those who are disenchanted with Gunn will get a break from him. I wouldn't call myself disenchanted, but I do think it'll be refreshing to get some brand new takes on DC next year, right? And see, that's the thing. Anybody that, for whatever reason, is disenchanted or is tired or just doesn't like James Gunn, well, don't worry. All of next year's DCU projects are not written and directed by him. So Lanterns, Supergirl, and Clayface. I don't want to hear a single complaint from you or anybody else about how, oh, James Gunn, that, nope. James Gunn is overseeing. He didn't write or direct Supergirl. He's not in charge of Lanterns. That's Damon Lindelof. And that's Mike Flanagan's script on Clayface. So, you know what? There's a whole lot of others. And this, to that end, Alex, I really am glad for this, because not only can we put aside, can we really like really be not more critical, but like just kind of point the magnifying glass of like, okay, Gun haters, what have you got to say now? But on top of that, it's also other creatives that I've heard a lot of, great things about, right? Like I've heard great things about Craig Gillespie's films. He's the director of Supergirl. I know people that enjoy Damon Lindelof's work, especially what he did with the Watchmen series 6 years ago, which it was phenomenal. It was outstanding. And of course, people can't stop talking about Mike Flanagan and how amazing his scripts are. So here we go. Here we go, people. Here we go, Lindelof, Gillespie, and Flanagan fans. You're going to be put to the test, right? And your excuse can't be, well, this is what James... Nope, absolutely not. Unacceptable, because James Gunn is in charge. James Gunn is the executive producer, but he's not the writer or the director. So if you got any issues with the DCU next year, it is hardly directly James Gunn's fault. The most that you could blame James Gunn is he said okay to the person that you already enjoy to write or direct the film, right? So... And ultimately, Alex, I feel like a lot of this really comes down to our own personal responsibility and accountability as fans. So the whole thing about how you said, let's see whether or not Gunn is more careful about how he hypes future projects up. Why should he be more careful? He should not have to be more careful. His entire goal as PR and as marketer, chief marketer for DC Studios, is to get us to watch. And quite frankly, he knows that he's got us, right? He knows that whatever project, is put out there in the DCU, we're going to be at the very least curious about it, right? So with respect to whether or not, he's not going to not hype up his project, he's not going to not hype up his universe. What we need to do, Alex, what we need to do as fans is temper our expectations. Because like I said, this is my Last Jedi moment, right? All the expectations, all the thoughts that I had, all the speculation that I had about The Last Jedi, and it turned out to be 100% completely wrong as far as what that movie actually was. And so now with respect to the future of the DCU, with respect to any projects going forward, especially ones that James Gunn is attached to, I will now temper my expectations. I will now no longer go off the deep end. That's not his fault. Okay, I feel like saying that he has to be more careful is putting the blame on him. No, not at all, because he did his job. His job was to get us to watch it and to get us talking about it. Doesn't matter if it bored you. Doesn't matter if you ever thought this episode sucks. Hey, it's all subjective. You were more than willing to say that. You were more within your purview, your rights as a fan to say that. But guess what? At the end of the day, you still watched the episode. You still gave HBO Max a full view of that episode. And that's all they really care about business-wise as far as numbers is concerned. So it really doesn't become an issue until you stop watching the DCU. And you already just said you're not going to. So James Gunn doesn't need to pull anything back whatsoever. He can continue. And it is up to us as fans to temper our expectations for what he says. Okay? So if people learn their lesson with respect to getting overly hyped here, hey, that is their business, right? And it goes both ways in that regard. And I think fan expectations, because we've been through this with the MCU, right? All the disappointment over the fact that we didn't get, the Tom Cruise, Tony Stark cameo in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, right? And all these other cameo expectations that were set based on what happened in Spider-Man No Way Home, right? And now all of a sudden the MCU is this, and it's not, it's a shell of its former self, yada, yada, yada. It all comes down to fan expectations. And we have a terrible time level setting ourselves based on our emotional connection to the franchise and these characters and our emotional connection to the source material as well. The second that we start to be more responsible with that, the easier this will be. but it is certainly not a one-way street. The onus is not all on James Gunn. In fact, I really wouldn't say the onus is on him because he did his job. He marketed his universe. He marketed that season finale so that we would all watch, and it worked. We all watched, and we're all talking about it right now, even a couple of weeks after it premiered, right? And yeah, I felt disappointed. You felt disappointed, but neither one of us are going to stop watching the DCU, and we're going to feel the way that we feel in that regard, right? And so he did his job. So there's no reason for him to be more careful, if you will. I think it just depends on the project. Now, what I am curious about, and I said this the other night on Vodka Stream, I am curious to see exactly how he does treat the hype for projects that he didn't write and direct himself. And it's not like he's not going to hype up Lanterns or Supergirl or Clayface. That's part of his job. But obviously, it's going to come from a different perspective. It's going to come from a different place because these are not stories that he wrote. They're stories that he greenlit. They're stories that he sanctioned. They're stories that he is a proponent of, but not that he greenlit. So it's going to be a slightly different approach, I would think, as far as the energy and perspective that he brings to promote those projects compared to the ones that he directly had a hand in as a writer or a director in that regard. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, ready for year 2 of the DCU next year for sure. He says, this time around for Next Generation, I watched Clues. All right, here we go. Yeah, I wondered how he was going to feel about this episode. He says, the Dixon Hill setup was good, considering how the episode progressed. Oh, yes, that's right. That's how the episode opened. Not going to lie, I was worried, because at first it seemed like the entire episode was just going to be Picard and Guinan playing make-believe in the holodeck. So I was very relieved when we got back to actual Star Trek stuff. I personally have no interest in an all holodeck episode like that. I'd still give it a watch, obviously, and try to be as open-minded as possible. But honestly, I really hope there are no episodes like that coming up. Well, that's a problem, Alex, because holodeck shenanigans is a time-honored trope of all Star Trek shows, and I can't think of one that hasn't had a scenario like that. Even Star Trek Strange New Worlds had a holodeck shenanigans episode this particular season. It's just part of the franchise. So I guess you'll just have to get used to it or skip those episodes. I wouldn't, though, because if you really want to get the full effect of the show, it'd be a good idea to watch, because there are some character development moments that do happen in those holodeck episodes. They may not be your favorite cup of tea, but they're very much still part of the Star Trek franchise. So fair warning in that regard. I don't know if you're coming up on one soon, but you're going to reach some. There's going to be some in this in the rest of this show. You're in the middle of season 4. You're going to hit some holodeck only episodes. You are. It's going to happen, most certainly. So I don't know that, I can't tell you how many they're going to be, and I can't tell you if you're going to like them or not or how you're going to feel about them, but I can at least give you a heads up that they're going to happen because it's a part of the franchise. So that's as best as I can give you. He says, I love how the takeaway of this episode is that the crew is too smart and observant for their own good, so much so that they had to tell the Paxtons how to do their own trick correctly at the end. It is not easy to fool the Enterprise crew. Well, yeah, and I think really, we could say that that's, intelligence and observation. We could also say it's experience, because at this point, through 3.5 years, they've Q Continuum, Borg, Ferengi, all that. They've been through so many different scenarios. Apart from the scenarios that they all went through in their own lives and their own careers before they joined the Enterprise. So, yeah, they're the flagship for a reason. There's no question about that. But yeah, it wasn't just, and the episode didn't frame it specifically as the Enterprise crew being that smart and observant. The episode framed it as humanity being that curious and asking too many questions, right? And asking so many questions, right? You can't just simply hit everybody with the memory wiper and throw them back where they were and leave all these other things around, because there was too much going on. You got over 1,000 people on that ship. You got science experiments here. You got somebody's sore wrist there. You've got the visions from the one empath and telepath that's on the ship. Like there were too many things that the Paxtons didn't account for with respect to the diversity on that ship and with respect to the humanity and the curiosity on that ship, for sure. So yeah, that's really, and Picard even says this, right? There are few things more appealing than a mystery, a good mystery to them in that regard. And so yeah, it was a very intriguing episode, and yeah, to know that after all these years, Data is still the only one that fully knows everything that happened, and he has to be 1,000% sworn to secrecy and can never reveal it whatsoever. Yeah, It is crazy. It is pretty crazy when you think about it in that regard. But yeah, solid episode for sure. He says next episode is called First Contact. Isn't that the title of one of the movies? Live long and prosper, Alex. Yes, it is. The second TNG movie is called Star Trek First Contact. No relation. No relation, no connection whatsoever. First Contact is very different plot line, very different stories. It does not involve the Borg. It does not involve any. No, absolutely not the same whatsoever. Do not treat it as any type of connection at all. First Contact, the episode, very different, wildly different than Star Trek First Contact, the theatrical film. So just to give you a heads up on that. But as always, Alex, thank you for the feedback. It is indeed greatly appreciated. And there you have it, a bit of a quicker episode of Flight Chat for this particular week. Thank you so much to everybody that sent in emails and feedback. Thank you to John, thank you to Stu, and thank you to Alex for your feedback this week. For everybody else, if you listen to anything on this show and you want to join in on the feedback circle, or if you've got anything else with respect to movies, TV, and other sorted media that you want to join in on the feedback discussion about, you know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the FlightCast, on BlueSky at FlightCast. You can comment on the posting for this particular episode on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/theflightcast. There's also the FlightCast Facebook page, and of course, I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.